up, everybody? It's the Roundtable Sports Podcast. My name is Taylor McLean, and it's been another action-packed week of football. Has it really been 5 weeks already? It feels like those 5 weeks have flown by for me. Maybe it's because I immerse myself nearly every day in just football. So it seems like it's all gone in a flash for me. But that's okay. We've still got plenty left, but that is a sad reminder that they will leave us someday and stop playing again. But until then, we've got plenty to go over. And I thought we'd start with what I thought was some interesting news today. I watched this game with the intention of talking about it, and then it actually turns out that there's a lot more to it. And of course, I'm talking about the San Francisco 49ers defeat of the Carolina Panthers. Normally, I would start on the San Francisco 49ers side, and certainly there's some news to be had there, but it turns out that I think we should talk about the Panthers first, since they went ahead and fired Matt Rhule today, which I think a lot of people had marked down as the first coach to be fired would be Matt Rhule. So I'm guessing that Vegas paid out some money on those bets, but still kind of surprising that you had somebody get fired this early in the process. I guess for business terms, it makes some sense. He can go and see if there's any college jobs that he wants to have, and the Carolina Panthers can get the jump on who they want to keep going forward, whether it's the coaches they have now or get a jump on who they may hire going into next season. And before you worry about Matt Rhule, keep in mind that he's still going to get paid about $40 million. I saw the tweet that for the next 48 months, he'll be getting paid somewhere around $900,000. I think it was a little bit less, but still it's an impressive number. And really, he doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to do going forward, which is what that contract always meant. And now he can truly do nothing and collect that money at this point. So I don't feel too bad for him at all, but it is too bad that he didn't get a better shake at being a head coach overall. He was definitely saddled with some rough quarterback situations that kind of seemed to be of his own making, I guess. It seemed like those were the best options at the time, maybe, when it came to picking up Sam Darnold, then ultimately picking up Baker Mayfield. And Baker may still end up being the best option that was available to him, but you have to wonder what would have happened if they'd have brought somebody more like Jimmy G into the mix. I don't think that Jimmy G is appreciably that much better than Baker Mayfield overall, but he doesn't have the same physical limitations, and I think at this point offers more of the game management you're going to get from this level of quarterback. So maybe that would have been better, but I honestly am not sure that anything was going to save Matt Rhule's job at this point. It didn't seem like this team was set up to be a contender necessarily, even though I don't mind their defense at all. Their defense actually has some pieces, whether it be Derek Brown, Brian Burns. There's definitely something to the defense. Of course, they lost J.C. Horn, and then as soon as he goes out, they have to put in Henderson, who makes some really bad plays and puts the San Francisco 49ers in some good positions there. So definitely rough. So definitely not great overall. And while I still think that there's some players to like on here, I still think that Christian McCaffrey was playing well. I still think that DJ Moore has pop in his legs. You can see that from the film too. So I'm not going to give up necessarily, but it's too bad that it never worked out for Matt and he didn't get a better QB. However, I'm not willing to put all the blame on Baker either. Baker definitely has his deficiencies, sure, but I think we're going to see once we get PJ Walker and probably ultimately Sam Darnold, if he ever gets his ankle healthy, I don't think that we're going to see appreciably better results overall. I don't see this being the same situation as the Las Vegas Raiders, where they were able to come back and do what they did last season. So while there might be a game where they make a comeback and try, and teams will sometimes have this thing where they really play hard to try and show everyone that it wasn't them that was the problem overall. They try to show that it was the coach that just fired. So you get this jump in effort, but it is a finite jump, and then they're back to their old ways typically. It has the tendency to set people adrift when, the overall goal of the playoffs and everything like that definitely seems lost in a situation like this where you just lost your coach. But we'll see how that happens. It looks like we're likely to get PJ Walker as the quarterback, which I kind of alluded to, or maybe even downright said, but let's go with alluded to at this point. As I had said, I'm not willing to heap this all on Baker Mayfield, but his play didn't help anything really overall. The physical limitations that he has, whether it's his ability to see in the pocket, whether it's his ability to take on contact or to avoid people from within the pocket, or his ability to throw the ball down the field when he's not all the way squared up and given his clean pocket. Those things all kind of bared themselves out in the worst way. But I felt more, and I said it last week, like there was something wrong schematically with what they were doing as well, and that they didn't have a good feel for how they needed to move the ball down the field and what they needed to do to be successful on offense. It didn't feel like they knew what that was exactly. And they kept the offensive coordinator, so maybe they will continue to field that type of situation. But it still felt like overall they just didn't have a good direction and seemed kind of listless as far as where they were going from week to week. So to see the coach get fired for something along those lines, and to see him out after the Panthers had played that way, certainly bears itself out to that conclusion. And they get a kind of a listless Rams team as well next week at the Rams. Not that I think they'll have a bunch of home fans like the Cowboys did, but they're kind of reeling after playing the Cowboys, which we're going to go over here in a moment as well. So maybe they can have the comeback game. As I said, I see good things from Christian McCaffrey. He still looks like himself, but the offense just seems like it doesn't have a good direction. And it really didn't seem like it was a situation like Kevin Stefanski had been able to put together for Baker that could accentuate his strengths. They needed him to be more complete and be more Matthew Stafford-esque, and he just doesn't have that in his game. They're not really locked into Baker, and they don't have that much, tied up in their quarterback position, and they'll have a new coach, and they'll have a bunch of new things, I suspect, maybe even a new regime. We'll see how that part of it, plays out. But they seem like a prime candidate to tank at this point and try and get a quarterback in there, because I don't think they're enjoying their Baker experience. I don't think that they were enjoying their Matt Rhule experience at all either. And it seems like both of those things were enough to get everybody moving in a different direction here. As far as the fantasy outlooks of everybody, I'm not going after these guys now that they've got a new coach either. This offense still is what it is. And while there may be a slight jump, and while I still think CMC can be an asset, it's not a situation I'm trying to insert myself into actively. Might try to get me some San Francisco 49ers, though, not Jimmy G specifically, but I have enjoyed his ability to lay the ball out for his teammates. And today, and part of what I think got the firing underway today is that the 49ers just kind of had their way with the Carolina Panthers. There was a lot of open passes, and it really didn't ever feel like Jimmy G had to stretch his wings as a quarterback very hard to get this done. He made some good plays, but they never forced him to step out of his shell and have to make plays in pure passing situations. And it just felt like he was making open throws all the live long day. Plus, they had the ability to run the ball, and whenever they have that, that's going to be a problem for the other team. It's especially impressive with how many people they've lost to this point. Most of those problems are on the defensive end, but still being able to run without Trent Williams has been impressive for them. Bad news on the 49ers side is Nick Bosa is hurt. They haven't said for how long at the time that I'm recording this, but it doesn't seem like he's looking real good for next week at this time. And then they had Jimmy Ward is going to have hand surgery. They were already playing without Eric Armstead. So if you don't have Joey Bosa and you don't have Eric Armstead, that's a big problem for your rush. And that's what's been especially effective about them is their ability to rush the passer. So that's a big problem overall. Robbie Gould got beat up twice by the return man. It seemed like the return man was all over Robbie Gould and seeking him out. And on the last one, took an especially hard hit. So he could be out for a minute. And then Emmanuel Mosley, who made a big play earlier in the game, is out for the season after suffering a torn ACL himself. So a lot of losses for the San Francisco 49ers, especially on the defensive side. And in the end, this game, football, does come down to a game of attrition. So how healthy can you be come game time, come the playoff time, when everything counts and it's a single elimination tournament, just how good can you be in those moments? And that's a lot of the problems that I have with quarterbacks is a lot of times they can get you to that moment, but they can't get you past that moment. So we'll see if Jimmy G is able to get them past that moment. If they do get there, they're going to need Nick Bosa to get there. We'll see what they say about his groin when he's reevaluated on Wednesday. Otherwise, for the 49ers, it looked really good. I like what they're bringing with having Kittle, Ayuk, and Debo out there. That does look especially explosive. And then Jeff Wilson's out there ripping off runs and looking good as the lead back. It was weird to see Tevin Coleman in there, but even he brought something to the table. And it seems like Kyle Shanahan just can't quit him. Because, Tevin Coleman was cut by the Jets, but you know what? Looked good in the second running back role. I can't lie. He's no Jeff Wilson, though. Jeff Wilson, I believe, is absolutely capable of sustaining what he's doing. Everything Jeff Wilson is doing is something he's capable of, and he fits the Shanahan system really well. And Eli Mitchell, he also fits really well, and he will be the lead back when he gets back. But how long will that last? And even then, Jeff will still be involved, especially around the goal line, because Jeff can bring the thunder when he needs to. Count me in. I like having Jeff back there, and it meant that they could use Debo Samuel in some other ways. He only got the 2 carries. Still, I would have liked to have seen him with more yards, but he was still way involved. They just did a better job than normal of keeping him out of it. And then having Kittle back and everything really helped everything. So they still need Debo, and they know it, and they still kind of feature things around him. So it just didn't work out that way today. And they didn't really have to stress themselves out. So they didn't have to push him unnecessarily. Next game I watched was the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Los Angeles Rams. I got a pretty good look at this game because it was alone by itself with the San Francisco 49ers game, as well as I think it was Seattle. I can't remember who the third game was at the time, but regardless, got a good look at the Cowboys game. And then I rewatched it again, and it is particularly impressive how good the defense is at this time. I don't know that I believe 100% that the secondary is just locked down on every step of the way. And I definitely saw Diggs get burned by Cooper Kupp on the big play, as well as he made a nice play on the Tutu Atwell play, but just barely couldn't get his hands on it. So I get sometimes why people don't like him a little bit. People are always looking on a reason to hate on the Cowboys, so I get that part too. But having him as kind of the secondary piece, and having Donovan Wilson and the rest of the Jordan Lewis and the rest of the secondary behind him is one thing, but it really is the pass rush that makes this Cowboys team go. Obviously, it's all based around Micah Parsons, but what's not obvious is we're watching a guy become Lawrence Taylor before our eyes. And it's not a Lawrence Taylor that you have to bring off the edge. he's so strong and explosive that he can take on any lineman and make them look foolish at a given time. And then when everybody else is getting single coverage because you have to worry about Micah Parsons or blocking anybody else anyway, then that's a big problem for your offense. And then he's blowing up those right tackles with regularity. And then DeMarcus Lawrence, Dorrance Armstrong, Odigizua, and Dante Fowler are out there rushing the passer. And that is a huge problem. When the Cowboys can put Micah, Dante Fowler, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Dorrance Armstrong out there to rush and still not give up that much in the running game if the team does decide to rush is a huge deal, and they are getting after it. And seeing Dorrance Armstrong out there getting the big sack and getting the touchdown and all that was especially heartwarming when the Cowboys had lost Randy Gregory in seemingly a, hey, you didn't support me type deal, even though the Cowboys supported him every step of the way to a fault even. But having Dorrance out there instead of Randy Gregory does hold up better against the run anyway and makes them more formidable just as a overall unit, I feel, when you don't have to worry about the team running at Randy. And of course, Randy got hurt this year as well, so that is not great for your team either when he's not available. But still, it's not to hate on him. It's to prop up the rest of the team and to say that, hey, we're really impressed with what you're doing. And then you throw in, Barr, and you throw in LVE looking healthy and being able to run around a ton, because so much of the offensive line's attention and blocking is having to be paid to the defensive line. It just all flows together in a great way. And then you don't have to ask your offense to do that much when Dak Prescott is out, and you can allow an offense that made 10 first downs wins the game. That's how good your defense is. And, anytime that you have a defense that you feel like they're going to hold a team to 20 points, you have a pretty good chance of winning that game. Count me a believer. It's been impressive. I would have lost the house if I would have been forced to bet on whether Cooper Rush would be an effective starter in Dak Prescott's stead, but it's been super impressive. I'm not ready to put him in for Dak or anything. I can totally see what he is, and the Cowboys aren't asking him to do a whole lot, but not turning the ball over and being efficient on your throws that you're asked to make is a great thing. And it's more than I could have ever hoped for. And I'm super proud of him. And I hope that Dak's available to play versus the Eagles still, but I'm also okay with rolling him out there. We're playing with house money now at this point. The Cowboys are. And don't fault me on being a Cowboys fan, okay? I was 7, 8, and 10 when the Cowboys last won their championships, and I'm from Central Texas, so I didn't have a choice, or I guess I did, but that choice left for Tennessee too. So I think I made the right one, regardless of the lack of success since the times when I was a little kid. And little Taylor definitely thought that those times would last forever, and then had to watch Troy get knocked out and, Michael get knocked out and Deion Sanders leave. By the way, having Deion Sanders come to the Cowboys as a 5th grader was incredible and was one of the coolest things ever too. So don't fault me for my Cowboysism, but I am a realistic Cowboys fan. I am excited, no doubt, and don't turn it off just because I'm a Cowboys fan. Just know I couldn't help myself. Okay. I'm not from New York and somebody gave my dad a jacket or something, and now I'm a Cowboys fan. Now, this wasn't, even though little kids are front runners, I got to front run for my hometown team. Okay. So don't fault me on that. Anyway, I digress. Excited about the Cowboys. Love seeing the running game with Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard out there holding everything up. Tony Pollard is especially explosive, but I hope everybody sees the need for Zeke as well. Being able to pound it up the middle and being able to work it between the tackles. You don't want to wear Tony Pollard out doing that, and that's not something he's going to excel at. You need to work him in, but you need to work him in and work the edges and he can't pass block either. His pass protection is compromised. He's the reason that Jalen Ramsey got to hit Cooper Rush right in the back on that huge sack. That's Tony Pollard's guy. He's supposed to see that, and he just doesn't have that in his bag. So that means the Cowboys have to do certain things when he's in the game, and defenses pick up on that. So if you're wondering why the Cowboys do things the way they do things, that's why. And I also agree, let me say that if Zeke doesn't take a haircut and go down to $7 or $8 million a year, lower than what he's got right now, or well, I mean, actually make it like 7 or 8, which would be like more like 10 less than what he's getting right now, then he's going to be off the team. But he is Thunder and Tony is the Lightning, and everybody just kind of needs to get over it from the Cowboys side, because everybody always talks about it needs to be Tony. Tony needs to get more carries. He does need to get some more carries, but Zeke also needs to be involved on the certain type of carries too. And he has pop in his legs at this time too. It's not the same thing, but he has different abilities, and the Cowboys need both of them. Speaking of needing things, the Rams need some things right now, and it's things that they're lacking from last year that they didn't really replace even though they tried. It's not that they didn't make the effort to replace Whitworth, replace Odell, replace Von Miller, although I can't point to anybody that they actually got for Von Miller as a replacement there, but that should have been the least of their worries. They brought in Allen Robinson, that was supposed to be a replacement for Odell, and then they signed Notebloom to an extension of reasonable proportions, but still, he was supposed to replace them. They were supposed to be fine. And I know the Cowboys defense is good, and we just talked about how high my hopes are for them, but it was especially discouraging to see just how bad the offensive line has been, how little space they were giving Matthew Stafford to pass, as well as creating to run, which throws everything out of whack for that type of offense. You need balance, and you need to be able to do both things. And they're kind of struggling with everything that isn't Cooper Rush at this time, which is a dual-sided problem. Allen isn't getting enough separation, and you need to kind of have a little bit more trust in Allen to throw it up for him and let him make the win in like 50-50 balls. But he hasn't been getting even close enough separation to even give Matthew a chance to fit something in like that. So it's been very underwhelming, and it's not like they didn't make moves to try and paper over those things, but at the same time, it's those moves they made, just like Baker Mayfield, just aren't getting the job done at this time, and they definitely have to make some adjustments in what they're doing, because it's one thing for the Cowboys, but it's another thing that they've had to rely on Cooper Kupp so dang much, and now he looks all beat up. Like he throughout the game, I see him kind of wobbling around, and you can see that he's been taking big hits, and it's just more hits than he needs to be taking. They're having to throw lower and lower efficiency passes to him, and he's having to create more and more. And I have some concerns that that's sustainable for him all season. Like, I know we're talking about a guy that had a gazillion receptions and won the Triple Crown and all of that, and he is that good. But still, it feels like they're overstraining him a bit, and I worry about him. Like, I had a good trade for him that maybe I didn't get done this last week. And now I find myself saying, okay, do you really want that trade now? Because it's like, he's going to keep producing, but is he going to be there for the fantasy playoffs? Like, is he going to be there for the regular playoffs if the Rams turn this around? Because there's some turning around to be done here. And I don't know if it's Odell bringing him in for the other side, because you used to be able to put Cooper on one side and Odell on the other, and they were both doing some dynamic things, and that was really hard to cover. And now Allen's not getting the dynamic stuff done, and you're having to rely more on Tyler Higbee, which I like Tyler Higbee, but that shouldn't be the second part of this offense. And like I said, they paid somebody to be that guy because Odell was not going to be ready for the first part of the season, but now they desperately need him, and he's a free agent. He might choose someone else. There's plenty of teams that could use Odell Beckham at this time. And I think that they're going to want him to be more in the mix. So how is that going to work? Is that going to be something that's going to be effective? Questionable at best. The final game that I watched before we get my bonus reaction to Monday Night Football was the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Buffalo Bills. I thought I'd get that game out of the way since it was so lopsided, and it did feel every bit as lopsided as it looked. I do like the Steelers skill position people. I love Claypool and Deontay Johnson and George Pickens together, not as a number one, any of them, but as a receiver core that's pretty stout. And Pat Fryermuth, who unfortunately, I believe he got concussed a little later in the game, even though he was kind of having an off game. I do like those guys, and I think that they absolutely can make plays for Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But they have been a rough watch on offense. And while Kenny wasn't especially great by any means, it felt like it was more on their inability to block for Kenny or the run game that really was the downfall of the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback this from where I'm at right now, but it did seem a little predictable that they were going to have trouble running the ball, not just against the Bills, but against the league at large. So the fact that they weren't able to run the ball against the Bills doesn't surprise me because their front is very formidable, but it still does shock me a bit that they didn't do more to address this unit in the offseason. And yeah, they had to try and figure out their quarterback position without Big Ben and everything, but I would have liked to have seen them put a little bit more into addressing this unit. As much as I like Kenny and I like Leal too, it's just tough when you want to try and evaluate Kenny and see this offense do something, and they really can't muster much of a defense versus this front. This has happened to several teams, though, with Buffalo, and I think it's going to be a continuing theme because it's something that the Bills have worked very hard on when it comes to building up the line and making themselves formidable in that way. So while I'm not surprised, I'm very disappointed that they couldn't get more done on this day. And there was more points to be scored for sure. There was missed field goals. There was missed opportunities for Kenny Pickett and the like, but I just didn't feel like he was that bad either. I know I can be an apologist when it comes to quarterback play sometimes, or be too harsh. I'm very hot and cold on some of these guys, but I don't think that if you put PJ Walker in there, if you put Mitchell Trubisky in there, that they fare much better in these games. It's a team game. We evaluate these quarterbacks really hard, and Josh has earned every accolade that's coming his way at this time and in the future. He's earned it in spades, and every quarterback that wants to be something in the NFL should take a page out of Josh Allen's book and try and be him a little bit more, because he has really raised his level on a year by year basis. And he has the physical skills. Sure, he's a freak of nature when it comes to his skill set and his athleticism and how big he is and how big his arm is. It's all top end talent, but he has put it all together in a very significant way when it comes to his footwork, when it comes to his decision making, his accuracy, his throwing with anticipation. These are all things that Kenny Pickett's going to have to work on as well. He doesn't have the physical skill set that Josh does, not even close, but it's not so far off that I don't think that he can do it. And it's not so much less or even less than what Mitchell Trubisky has. And he actually has the ability to make decisions beyond the intended play. Like, he could actually improvise a little bit, and seems like he knows what he's doing sometimes when it comes to quarterback position. This 3 points be damned. Like, I get that this is a bad beating and that the Bills put it on the Steelers right here for sure, but I think it's just because the Bills are good and healthy and are just really, really good. Like, hey, you give up a 98-yard pass and then a 60, however long the second pass was, and then Diggs and Shakir, and you're giving it up, and you don't have TJ Watt either. The defense isn't quite the same without him out there, and it really has lost a lot of pop overall in the last couple of outings. But in the end, I mean, if you're a Steelers fan, do you feel like Mitchell Trubisky is getting you anywhere different than what would have happened here today? Like, do you still think that Mitchell is a better quarterback overall? I think at this point, you're better off letting Kenny try. And if you're bad, then you're bad. You can always take another shot at quarterback next year if that's what you need to do. I think it's probably going to be better to draft a left tackle, maybe. That might be what I'm looking at if I'm them, but hard to say. They've got a lot of things to look at there, and it's just not something I'm used to with the Steelers. But if there's anybody that can figure it out, it is the Steelers. So reserving judgment on Kenny. I want to see him against a lesser squad. Obviously, at some point, he's going to have to beat the big squads if he's going to be a long-term starter in the NFL. But I don't know. This didn't feel like a no-hope situation. It just feels like a young quarterback situation, a quarterback that I'd still rather have than Mitchell Trubisky. And finally, on the podcast today, I recorded earlier and then stayed up so that I could watch the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Las Vegas Raiders. And that game did not disappoint by any means. Any game with Patrick involved gets me excited in the first place. And then I love to take a look at the Raiders. They're a high variance team that, with this game, could either be in the lead for the number one pick or in the mix for the AFC West, depending on how the game went. So it's a terrible result for them as far as Kansas City getting this win, but it felt like that was a well-deserved win for Kansas City at the same time. The Las Vegas Raiders did a really good job of rushing Patrick and keeping him on guard and off time for the most part. It was only when they got in the red zone and couldn't stop Travis Kelce to save their life that they really had problems. Not that they kept the Chiefs from getting down into the red zone or anything, but still they did a pretty good job for the bulk of the game of keeping the Chiefs a little off guard and keeping themselves in the game. It is truly impressive to watch Travis Kelce work out there on the field. I know it wasn't a huge yardage total, but his ability to navigate in the goal line and just throughout those sets makes him invaluable in and of itself. And then you see what he can do on a given day with the yardage and the like as well. And it's just an incredible thing to watch. He's one of the best tight ends of all time, no doubt. And the fact that, he's doing what he's doing at the age that he is, and that even throws a more impressive bullet point on the resume at this time. There was some loose whispering before the season from some of my compatriots that he might lose it and that without Tyreek, this offense might be sunk. And there is times that they could definitely use Tyreek, and that his ability to play the ball on top of being one of the preeminent deep threats makes them dangerous. But that was going to be a lot of resources to sink into that connection. And they've done a pretty good job of filling everything out around Travis Kelce to the point where I feel like what they're doing right now is sustainable. I will say that I had some higher hopes for their offensive line. Orlando Brown hasn't been anything to write home about and kind of has the Chiefs in a weird leverage play to end up being their left tackle anyway, even though I don't know that they should pay him like one of the preeminent left tackles, like they're probably going to have to. It seems like guys get around him too much. And even though he wasn't the problem tonight, Chandler Jones was absolutely causing him problems. Granted, Chandler Jones had a game last year where he had 5 sacks, and when he's healthy and right, can be a force. But still, I just expect more out of my left tackles that I'm about to pay $20 million. And then Max Crosby was a problem, especially early on, which to their credit, they got the rush thing kind of figured out in the second half, but still it was a little bit disturbing to me to see Max Crosby, to see Chandler Jones give them so many problems in the first half, and be able to take advantage of a unit that I was hoping would end up being a strength. I suppose that's on the table. They didn't run the ball terribly necessarily, but I don't know. The way that they were being abused on the edges, that's something they definitely need to look at and adjust their protection schemes appropriately if they run into someone that has a Max Crosby type guy. Because make no mistake about it, Max Crosby is absolutely a game wrecker worthy of not the Micah Parsons level we were talking about earlier, but by God, he's putting a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. He's making a lot of quick moves and he's keeping people's hands off of him, which allows him to get in there and get after Patrick on a bunch of occasions. To the Chiefs' credit, though, they held their poise, they made adjustments and continued to pour it on and continued to work their game. There's also some interesting shuffling in the running backs for the Chiefs. They're still using a massive committee, but something to keep an eye on is their usage of Jerick McKinnon in this game. He looked like the most explosive back to my eye, and it seemed like they were more intent on working him in. There was still a good amount of Clyde Edwards and Allaire involvement, but it did seem like at a certain point they turned to Jerick McKinnon and he was giving them more juice. So that's another thing in addition on the Chiefs to look at. Between the linemen and the wide receivers, there's a lot of spreading it around, and I think it's going to be hard to tell from week to week which guy is going to be the guy that you're going to want to lean on. Valdez-Scantling had probably the biggest night of all three of those guys and had a drop and could have probably gone over 100 had he caught that, but still it's been Juju at times and it's been Valdez, and then Mecole was in there as well. So throw in Sky Moore, doesn't seem like there's a lot of clarity in any of that, which I thought Juju might separate himself a little bit in that cluster of guys, and he was hurt coming into the game, but looked just fine. So I don't know. It just doesn't seem like there's going to be somebody besides Kelsey that we're going to be able to count on until there's a little bit of attrition. Hopefully not, because having all those guys means a lot for the offense overall. On the Raiders side, this was a hard fought game on their part, and they did everything they could to win the game. Obviously, losing Darren Waller early in the game hurts them. He had a hamstring injury, so hard to say how long he's going to be out with that, but that's definitely not good for the offense overall. He hadn't been as involved as he had been in the past, but having him be explosive up the seams is something that they definitely needed and didn't have. Luckily, they had Hunter Renfrow back. I know he didn't do a ton, but he was targeted more than what he got, and he was the target on the last play, it seems, where they got hung up together, him and Devonte Adams. The Chiefs did a good job of pressing and kind of threw the routes off, and then Devonte and Renfrow end up getting hit. Obviously, Devonte was the one with the huge day, making the big play in both halves, actually, for the Raiders. The long TDs were something they desperately needed and nearly ended up getting them the game. They made a weird decision to go for two instead of making the tie on the final drive, which apparently is what the analytics says that you're supposed to do. But I don't know, it felt weird in the moment, and I didn't especially feel like the Raiders had the momentum or had the domineering offense that made that a good decision. Certainly that's just me after the play and after the game being Captain Hindsight, but it definitely felt weird in the moment for a team that's 1-3 to really go for it like they did. And it took all the pressure off of Patrick and off of Kansas City to score. And granted, the Raiders got the ball back and they, made a good push to try and score and didn't end up getting the job done. But I don't know. I question that decision. And I guess there's going to be a bunch of people in the Las Vegas area and on the beat there that do the same. There's probably also going to be a lot of questions for Davante Adams. He shoved a sound guy on the way out of the stadium after showing a good amount of frustration. Apparently, it's kind of starting to hit home for him that this is what his life is now, that he made the choice to come out to Las Vegas and Derek Carr. But it is what it is. And I guess you have to be happy with your 3 catches and 2 touchdowns. In this case, it doesn't look like he was. It'll be interesting to see if he gets in any trouble for shoving that guy on the way out. It felt super unnecessary, and ESPN is all over it. And I got to think that that's going to be something that everybody sees by tomorrow. Maybe it's not a big deal and maybe they just kind of let it go, but it was a Kansas City employee, it looked like, and he definitely just kind of shoves him to the ground for what looks like no apparent reason. And I hate that I'm overshadowing what Devonte Adams did on the field because they were very big touchdowns. I'm definitely going to make a video about it. And you know what? It's probably going to include him shoving the guy on the way out too, because it was, classless. And I get being frustrated, but man, pretty weak on his part. And this is kind of what you chose, man, because I'm not a huge Derek Carr guy. It was kind of shocking to me to see that he had so many drives to win the game. I wouldn't have bet money on the over for that. And that is, an impressive number for him. But ultimately, like, I feel like he comes up short as a quarterback, and he just doesn't really do it for me when it comes to pure passing situations and his ability to make complex decisions a lot of the time. I have this thing with him where he either throws it deep like he did to Davante Adams, or he throws it short to Hunter Henry, and there's not a whole lot of in between. There's no 15 to 25 yard throws. It's all beyond that or before that. That's been the big issue in the past. My hope was Davante Adams could break him out of that, and it seems like he's willing to go deep to Davante, but you notice the other totals there are pretty low when you look at 39, 29, 25, and 19, as compared with the 124, which without those throws would be a super low number. So I don't know. You're breaking it down statistically, that's one thing, but my eyes have always told me that Derek Carr is playing quarterback in an inefficient way, and in a way that I would be giving that extension the extreme side eye for going forward, because I think there's a finite place that Derek Carr and quarterbacks of his ilk can take you. Jimmy G, Baker Mayfield, Ryan Tannehill, Kirk Cousins, all of these guys that have skills, but they lack this upper level, elite level of quarterbacking, that it's just like they're not quite the right amount of Jedi to be able to work things in a way that you feel confident on a last drive that they're going to be able to bring your team down there and score that last touchdown. There's just so many guys, a handful really, less than you could count on 2 hands that can get that done. So maybe that's me overreacting to this game, but that's just always been the feel that I've gotten from Derek Carr, and that's the Las Vegas quarterback, and everybody that's with them has kind of made their bed with it. And we'll see if it works out, because while I like Davante Adams and he made a couple of big plays here, is he ultimately going to be able to put them in a position to be a contender, or are they going to be trending more towards, being at the bottom of the league and having a really high pick? They've locked Derek Carr into so much money that even if they do that, would they be able to draft a quarterback at that point? What would they do? Are they going to, go for the Alabama pass rusher Anderson, and that's going to get them over the top? I do think Max Crosby and Anderson would be a sick pairing, but where are you going with this franchise with Derek Carr as your quarterback's the ultimate question. maybe not a question we're going to answer tonight. I'm glad that I stayed up and watched this game. It was a lot of fun, but that's really all I've got on it to this point. The Chiefs are good. It was interesting to see them figure it out, but they still have questions too. Like, is Wiley going to get worked like that on the right side more? I mean, there's a lot of things on the line here for both teams going forward in this season. It's a big year for this division overall, period. I mean, you've got the Russell Wilson story going on. You've got Justin Herbert trying to take the next step. And then you've got these two. And which way are the Raiders going? And are Kansas City, contenders for the Super Bowl and the 1 seed with their record at this point? We'll see. Still got to play the Bills, right? Anyway, that's what I've got for today. Appreciate your time. Hopefully this is catching you in the morning and it's fresh information that you're excited about. Appreciate everybody watching the videos. I enjoy making them, and I appreciate that everybody kind of likes seeing it from the angle that I like to see it, at least the people that are behind me, where you get to see it from the coach's film angle. I feel like you get a better feel for what's going on, being able to see it that way. The broadcast does what it can, and it needs to have the receivers and stuff in there more than what that angle offers. But when you know what you're looking at and you're able to integrate that with the sideline camera view, I feel like you really know what happened in the game. And that's what I like to look at. And I think that's what gives me an edge on a lot of people. So keep looking to the videos for sure. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube and to the podcast. Download if you've gotten to this point and haven't done so. That's the important metric for the podcast. And have a great rest of your day.